Yeah, I think so. I think when we talk about a movement, we'll talk about some of the differences between a a flash in the pan versus a sustained movement. I think that's one of the keys. Is it has sustained momentum over time, and it has the ability to last and to endure. I think there's a big difference there.
There's a huge difference, and it's like the best example of that was probably the Als Ice Bucket challenge, and that was a few years ago now, and that really impacted the Movember campaign because it happened in September and was one of the most viral campaigns ever from a cause point of view. And come October and then Movember, the vast majority of people were telling us, hey, I've already done my charitable thing online. I've supported this cause and poured a bucket of ice water over my head, so I'm not going to grow a moustache. And we were watching that very carefully the next year, and the ALS Foundation created a partnership with Major League Baseball and a number of other corporate partners, and it just didn't fly at all. And when you think about Movember, and there were a lot of comparisons made between the Ice Bucket Challenge and Movember, because at its very basic and critical assessment of Movember is a gimmick. It's about growing a moustache. But for us, we've thought long and hard about that right from the get-go. We just didn't want this to be a gimmick. And we always get asked, well, why don't you just have fake moustaches that you can buy at a retailer for a couple of $1 donation? And that would work probably for 1 year. But for us, it's about that journey and a real commitment for the 30 days. And yes, we've raised $750 million, but for us, the conversations that are created by growing a moustache are more important than the funds we've raised. This is one of the biggest issues that I highlighted before, and that's nudging some of the negative aspects of masculinity. It's getting guys talking about the big stuff going on in their life. So we think a lot about the novelty aspect of Movember and how we don't fall into that trap. And that's the difference, I think, between a campaign and a movement. Yeah. And 13 years now, we focus a lot on the cause and what we're trying to achieve, the issues that we're trying to solve, and showing our community that are part of the movement, the progress that we're making toward that. And as I mentioned before, making them the heroes and saying, because of their effort, no matter how big or small, they're helping us get along that path.
So what we're going to do is we're going to take as much, we're going to have to zip through these, but we've identified kind of 6 elements. I'm sure there's others that we could add to this, but we're going to go through just kind of 6 key elements of really building a movement. And the first one that Adam's already touched on is the idea of a great brand. And I want to add to that this concept of social currency. You think about it when you, the clothes that you wear and the car that you drive, often reflect who you are. It's kind of an expression of who you are, who you want people to, what you want people to think about you. And I think, the nonprofits or the causes and the movements that have the ability to create that same effect, that idea of social currency, it means something beyond just the cause, but it means something about who I am as a person. I'm happy to and proud to promote it on my social media feed. I'm proud to wear it on my wrist, wear the t-shirt, wear the hat, whatever it is. I think a great brand has that ability, and especially in a cause space, that makes a big difference. I'm proud to wear a mustache, right?
Yeah. It says a lot about you, whether it's good or bad. But right from the get-go, there are 4 co-founders of the Movember Foundation, and much like Charity Water, none of us had any charitable experience before, and we're all from either tech, branding, marketing, or development backgrounds. And our starting point with Movember was the brand, and creating a brand that people would love and respect. And we don't have a brand manager at Movember because, in my view, everyone is a brand manager and a brand ambassador that's out there talking on behalf and representing the Movember Foundation. So we hold the brand precious at Movember. because it's ultimately what people are attracted to. And there's so many aspects of the brand now, and it's every single touch point. And a lot of it's around transparency and accountability. But for us, one of our mantras is having fun and doing good. So yes, we focus on some really serious issues, including suicide. But the way we do everything is in a really fun, irreverent way, and that's the best way to get men and the community engaged in their health.
Yeah, it's good. I think it's not just, oftentimes I work with organizations and they're like, well, there's no way we're not as cool as Charity Water. Well, very few organizations are, right? So, but I think it's not just about being cool, it's about having a personality. Like you said, having fun, making it mean something about who you are and how you express yourself beyond just the cause, but about the personality that the cause has, the brand has.
Yeah, I mean, we often get the same feedback around, oh, it's easy for you, you're Movember, and it's like, well, we need to distill it back, and we're holistically about men's health, and then we focus on prostate cancer, testicular cancer, and then suicide prevention for men, and none of those issues, like most issues here, none of them are sexy, none of them are stuff we necessarily want to talk about, but it's about creating that bridge that enables the community to engage in it. And whether it's a wristband, a moustache, a ride, a run, or a walk, whatever it is, that becomes the bridge with which people can advocate on your behalf. And that bridge to your cause is really important. Just as an aside, so testicular cancer, April is Testicular Cancer Awareness Month, so we did a campaign this year around that, and it's the most common cancer for young men, but it's rare and highly curable. And the biggest issue there is it's early detection. And so the key is encouraging guys to do a self-examination, and if something's up, go to the doctor. So we're going, all right, how do we create some content around that will be fun and engaging, but get the message through? So what we did was, the best place to do a self-exam is in the shower. So we created a soap on the rope in the shape of testicles. And so basically it was a reminder in the shower. They were smooth, which is the way they should be felt. And the best thing was, after you did your self-exam, you could wash your face with a set of bowls on soap. But it's my point there is always being true to your brand DNA. And ours is from a very fun, irreverent background, and it's the way you get men engaged in these serious issues. So always be thinking about, all right, how can we maintain that brand edge?
It's good. All right, we're going to go to the next one. The next element is this idea of a deeper meaning. And I want to take a minute on this one because I think this is really interesting. If you think about Charity Water, for example, I always felt early on that Charity Water really got its momentum and became a lot of its popularity and grew, not because it was a cause that everyone was cared about. It wasn't, not everyone really was aware of the water crisis. It wasn't, I will say, and I've told Adam this morning at breakfast, I always felt like Charity Water, like we were cheating because it's such an easy cause to represent visually, to show the water and the before and after. So it was kind of a little bit cheating in that way. But there was also this kind of underlying deeper meaning that was not just about the cause, but it was about kind of reinventing charity. It was about reestablishing trust in charities, the 100% model, the proving it, the transparency, showing the wells on the map, those kinds of things that sort of, I think, reestablished people's trust that charity wasn't just a ripoff, that there was a way to do charity differently. And then I think the fundraising was part of that as well. But it was kind of about not just the cause, but about doing things differently and reestablishing trust in charities. And I think that was a big reason that people gravitated toward the cause early on, and it's still, and I think it's also been caused some ripples throughout the nonprofit sort of landscape of how people approach charity. But I also think, Movember, what would you say would be the deeper meaning with Movember?
Yeah, it's been an evolution because Movember started as a joke over beers to put the moustache back on the face of fashion. And the first year we did it, there was no cause associated with it, but it generated so much conversation and so many questions as to why you were doing it. The next year we sat down and thought, how do we evolve that and how do we use that power of the conversation for good? And so our starting point was the fun and reverence of growing a moustache and celebrating that journey. And the four of us at start of Movember were inspired by the women around us and all they were doing for women's health, particularly breast cancer. And we just thought that there was nothing for men's health. And when you dive into that issue, it is a significant issue. And we focus a lot, obviously, on men's health. But we fundamentally believe that if we can nudge some of the negative aspects of masculinity, if we can get men living happier and healthier and longer lives, that will naturally flow on to a number of women's rights issues and women's health. And it'll have a holistic impact on the community and children at large. So for us, the cause was second, and over the evolution of Movember, certainly the fun of reverence, doing Movember alongside your mates or your buddies was initially the key part of it, but pretty quickly, as you get involved in it, growing or fundraising for it, you become more aware of the issues that we're trying to solve here, and they are significant. And as I mentioned this morning, prostate and testicular cancer, we're on a path to curing those diseases by about 2030. It doesn't mean they'll go away, but they'll be manageable diseases, and no man should die from those if they turn up and are aware of the issues. The third issue, suicide prevention, we're losing that battle. The rates of male suicide are going up. In the US today, 88 men will take their life, 20 of those will be veterans. And it's a hidden health crisis that no one's talking about. So for us, in terms of evolving our organization and maintaining the movement, putting that stuff front and center is really important, because the trend of growing moustaches was at its peak in 2012, for sure, and then beards, much to our dismay, came on trend after that. But what hasn't gone off trend is the issues that we're trying to solve. So as an organization, through our messaging, again in the right way, putting that deeper meaning and purpose front and center as to why this movement is still even more important is the way we believe will sustain it.
From an outsider's perspective, I think it's interesting, when I saw Movember sort of come on the scene, it felt like it was, if you ask most fundraisers and development people, they like to target, middle-aged, typically, maybe not this group because they're a little more younger, but middle-aged women are kind of the key demographic where they give the most to charity. And it was a chance for men to basically get involved in charity, even beyond, like you said, beyond the cause, then they started learning about the cause, but it was about just a chance to get involved in a different way, right?
Yeah, I mean, the average age of our participant is about 31, and that spans from guys at college through to 70, 80-year-old men. And we deliberately made it very, very accessible and easy. And in fact, we're often called the laziest charity event in the world, because you need to do less to actually raise money and awareness for this issue. But we don't have any fundraising minimums or anything like that, and we believe that's very important. So each year we have about 1 million participants. Probably 40% of those don't raise any money. And obviously we want to nudge that, but those guys are still having conversations. And as I said before, that's more important than the funds that are raised. So it's a combination of awareness and engagement, because often they'll go on their own journey and do it the first time, and it's more about the fun side of it. They'll start to get engaged with the why toward the end of their first campaign, and then the next year they'll come back as a fundraiser, because they've had, that they understand why Movember is so important.
So we've got about 10 or 12 minutes left, and we're gonna try these last 4 real quick. So this idea of personal ownership, I think this is one that we've kind of talked about a bit, but at Charity Water it was about your birthday. It was about you setting a goal and taking ownership of that. And then I think Movember is similar. Like, there's this idea of giving away the cause, letting people take ownership of it and make it their own, so they can feel the responsibility for making it successful.
Yeah, I mentioned before, it's like at Movember we're about building this stage and creating this brand, but then how men and women engage in the campaign is totally open. And for the guys it was about growing a moustache. And we've got fundraising events, and we added a new path to participate last year, which was called Move. So Move is the first 4 letters of Movember. So it was a physical challenge, and it was the first time women had a really tangible way to engage in the campaign. And the way we tied it back to men's health was challenging them to get the men in their life to match their move. So it could be Move every day of Movember. It could be to run 150 kilometers over the course of the month, or whatever you learn to swim, whatever it was. So we kept that open, and you've always got this challenge. You know, Movember about growing a moustache was quite prescriptive, but how you did that, how you celebrated it, was totally open. And even with Move, it's like it's totally open. It's about getting more active, and the physical challenge that goes with that. And there is some trade-offs between being prescriptive and being open, but the key thing is heroing the people that are supporting and letting them do it their own way.
And that kind of segues to the next one, which is building this community. And I know that this is something that I'm going to let you talk on this one, because I think you've done a really great job of connecting people, Movember has, around the world, feeling like they're part of something bigger.
Yeah. One of the key ways we'll impact men's health is by getting men more socially connected. We've done a bunch of research that tells us that men, when they get to 30 years of age and older, become socially isolated because they put work and their family first. And this becomes really important when they're faced with a transition in their life or a challenge in their life, be it losing a job or relationship breakdown or retiring from the military or whatever it is. They just don't feel comfortable enough to contact their mates and their buddies to go, hey, I'm struggling, because they haven't seen them in 4 or 5 months. So a big part of what we do, both from a cause point of view and a fundraising point of view, is encourage this sense of community. And the vast majority of people that participate in Movember do it as part of a team. So it's that team competition and team banter and element. But beyond that, it's making them aware that they're part of something much bigger. Whether they've raised $10 or $1,000, they're contributing to this enormous movement. So we, through our technology platform, make it the ability for a guy growing a moustache in Sydney to connect with a guy growing a moustache in Boston or Montreal or Cape Town or wherever they are in the world. So that micro sense of community at a team level, but then at a global level sort of builds that community and movement.
I think one of the ways that Charity Water and others have done this well is actually celebrating those people and making them the center of attention, which is a really important thing to do, creating videos, thanking them, highlighting them as heroes, like the Mo Heroes thing that you guys do as well. And I think that helps build a sense of it's not about us, it's about you. It's not about we, like the small we, it's about the big we. And I think that's a shift that is celebrating them, not celebrating the organization. Yeah. Okay, we're doing well. We're gonna get through this. This next one, great storytelling. I think this one speaks for itself. But we were talking about it's not just, there's storytelling about different aspects, and it's a little bit of a challenge because you want to tell stories about the impact and the great results, but you also need to not lose sight of the need. And sometimes by celebrating the results, you feel like people think, well, they're doing fine, and maybe they don't need my help. But how do you do both? I think that's a good question.
Yeah, it's a really interesting trade-off because you've got to highlight the issue and the urgency around the issue, and that really does inspire action, or it should, will be the aim of that storytelling. Critically important, but what is also important is, showing the transparency around the progress that you're making, which is really interesting because we track all this stuff with so much data and metrics. It is so important to show that, but when you show that, engagement drops off because people go, oh, that's fantastic, you're making progress, you're solving these issues, you don't need my support anymore. So it's a really interesting trade-off. And storytelling is a key part of this, and it's also heroing the people that have been impacted, but also doing the fundraising and advocacy for you. But getting cut through is getting harder and harder because we've all now got our own personal platform to broadcast our own stories. But again, for us, it's providing men with content around their changing appearance and why they're doing it, inspiring them to tell our story on our behalf. And yes, we've got a social media footprint, but it's nowhere near as big as our community, which is millions of people, and each of them have, a couple of thousand followers or whatever. You start to do that math, and it's a footprint of 1 billion people, but you've got to inspire your community to be telling the story.
I think there's also this sense of like cause fatigue that comes along too, where people, you hear about a certain issue, hunger, your whole life, and so it's, oh yeah, hunger, we know. I mean, it's like, how do you make it fresh and relevant, and because you're competing with, let's say, the refugee crisis that's like hot and front burner, right? So same thing with an amazing cause, but once you've told that story well, even if you told it really well, after 5 or 6 or however many years, people kind of get numb to that a little bit. So you have to continually reinvent yourself and tell it in a fresh way.
Yeah, there was no doubt part of Movember's success was because of the popularity of the breast cancer movement. So when you start to look at prostate cancer just as a specific issue, it affects as many men as breast cancer does women. And when you told people that like 5 or 6 years ago, people were shocked. Because you go, wow, look at all the amazing campaigns for breast cancer, and there was literally nothing for prostate cancer. And we're very, very careful. We don't play off or compare the two ever, but there was a lot of people that just go, oh wow, we've done so much for breast cancer, it's about time we did something for prostate cancer and for men's health. And there's no such thing as a bad cause or bad issue, right? And we're all sort of competing for that mind share and charity dollar, and it gets exceptionally tough. And 13 years now on, we battle with fatigue all the time, because we put men's health and particularly prostate cancer on the map, and now people are sort of comfortable, and we are on a path, as I mentioned before, to curing that disease. It doesn't mean we need a lot more money and a lot more human capital and research, but we're on a path.
Good. So the last one is a little less sexy, but we're going to end with this one anyway. Infrastructure. It's a great word. We all love it. But this comes down to the kind of the operations and the people, and also the platforms, the digital, the tech platforms that you're using. And I think that's something. I mean, that's where Classy comes in as a great platform that I've gotten a number of clients using, because I think it gives that scalability that you're looking for. And I think we were talking this morning at breakfast just about how things like governance and a solid tech infrastructure and things like that are often overlooked, but can really cause the demise of organizations, especially when they start growing fast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I sort of always think about, as a charitable organization, there's 3 parts to it, and each of them has to be functioning properly to sustain the charity. So you got your fundraising engine, whatever that is, your fundraising campaigns. Then you've got your mission and purpose, and then you've got the back office or infrastructure, which covers a whole bunch of stuff, including governance and boards and tech infrastructure and the like. And there's so many examples of charities that have failed in one of those 3 segments that are no longer around. And Invisible Children was one of them that didn't get their governance and back office right. And they blew up, and people started to look into it and go, hang on, there's holes in this, and they're no longer around. So getting those three parts right is critically important, and the tech infrastructure needs to be. Well, I often say to our team, when you're engaging particularly young, 18-year-olds through to sort of 40, 50-year-olds, they don't care that you're a charity. They expect the experience, particularly online, to be the same as what it is in Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram or whatever else they're into, and Snapchat. Those companies are literally spending hundreds of millions of dollars on the user interface and the user experience. None of us can afford to do that. But if you can't sign up, if you can't make a donation, you can't do a transaction as seamlessly as you can on Amazon, they're out. And they don't care that you're a charity. And that's the challenge that we've all got, is keeping pace with the user expectations. And again, that's where platforms like Classy help, because their job is to keep pace, right? And so as charities, we don't need to worry about that. We need to worry about what's our next innovation around fundraising campaigns and stuff.
And that's about it. So those are our 6 elements that we've identified, and then I think we're just right at about the end, and Brad's going to let you guys ask some questions. Thank you.
Round of applause real quick. Thanks, guys, so much. Check. That was awesome. I'm sure you guys have lots of questions. So I've got Julian over there on the right-hand side. I'm going to cover the left-hand side. We'll get to as many as we can. We don't have a ton of time, so I apologize if we don't get to you. But why don't we start up here in the front?
Thank you both so much for sharing your experiences. My name is Valerie. I'm the program director at a nonprofit called the Bread Project, and we teach folks how to bake, and then we help them find work afterwards. In terms of my questions around branding and rebranding, and because the Bread Project, we've been around for a long time, and so right now we're actually combating, in terms of our program, rebranding it, because we've made so many changes, and we've seen a lot of, not necessarily like flack, but a lot of questioning about it, because organizations that have been around for a long time, it's hard when you make a change because everyone is so used to, what you're perceived as. They already make a lot of assumptions. And so I was wondering, what are, for you, some ways that you manage change in terms of your growth of your organizations? How do you combat those questions when it becomes, oh, why don't you just stay the same? You've been doing it for so long, like, why do we have to bring in something new? And how do you manage that in terms of, your board, your funders, as well as people in the community?
Good question.
I can go with that. So in the early days, our brand challenge was making people aware of what Movember was and getting them engaged, and we have done a pretty good job of doing that now. Our core brand challenge now is educating people that we're not just a campaign, that we are a foundation. And we're most known for our work in prostate cancer. But we've been funding testicular cancer and suicide prevention initiatives since 2006. And so our core brand challenge is repositioning our brand from being known as a campaign to being known as a foundation. And in our mind, just as people think about breast cancer and probably think of Komen, and as they think of cancer generally, they think of the American Cancer Society. Ultimately, when you think about men's health, we want the community to think about the Movember Foundation. There's no easy way to do that. We're on a 3-year path, and it's 1,000 things 1,000 times. And it's being consistent with your brand and looking at every touch point and every moment and going, all right, how can we reinforce and educate people that we are more than just a campaign? And organizationally, it's with change, we had to create a sense of urgency around why we needed to change. And internally, 2012 was our biggest campaign. We raised $145 million that year. Our revenue and participation has dropped off since then. It's about 100 million now. So we had to create a sense of urgency internally from the board down as to why we needed to change and reposition the organization. Unless you've got that internal buy-in at every single level, it won't work. But once you've got that, as I said, it's 1,000 things 1,000 times, and it's going to take us 3 or 4 years to achieve. There's no one thing, there's no silver bullet. You can't put a press release out and go, hey, we're a foundation. It's like, we've been a foundation forever. There's no simple answer, but it's like that internal buy-in and creating that sense of urgency internally is key. And then it's 1,000 things 1,000 times. And it takes a long time to create a brand. It creates a long time to reposition a brand.
Hi. So I can see myself. Ayelet Gnizi. I'm actually work at the university and I do research on fundraising and nonprofits. So I have a question. So when you spoke about charity water, one of the things that you said is that the new model, essentially, one of the objectives and the goals was to gain trust, consumers' trust. So as far as I know, except for Charity Water, other nonprofits have not adopted the same model, right? So other nonprofits continue to, function the same way that they did in the past, which we know is problematic trust-wise. Any thoughts why that's the case?
I don't think the 100% model is for everybody. It's not for most, and I don't think it's all about that. I think a lot of it was about the transparency, the showing where the money's going, showing the impact, showing the, I think transparency is a better word, a better way to look at it. Because I do think that the organizations that are not focusing on transparency are limiting themselves and are probably seeing the effects of that. And even if, you know, I like what Dan Pallotta has to say and how he, you know, so I balance the 100% model with sort of with Dan's approach of, you know, it's all about investing in the organization. I think both are valid. I think that the key is that you're just open and honest and transparent about what it takes to run the organization, where that money's going, so doesn't feel like there's a, you know, there was some negative press, for example, around, you know, the Haiti disaster. People felt like they were giving to that, but they really weren't. That money wasn't going. So I think things like that tend to cause an erosion of trust, and we have to do everything we can to just be real transparent with people, because we live in an age of whether you're transparent or not, you're going to be, you know, people are going to kind of figure it out eventually. So, you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, we don't operate the 100% model. Ultimately, someone is contributing and donating to charity water that is covering the operating costs, and it's a way then to remarket and reposition your cost base, because you've still got fundraising and admin costs in your organization. It just happens that someone else is covering those, so then you can say, hey, during the campaign, 100% of what's raised is going to the cause. But for us, it's, you know, and this is the really interesting part about the charity sector, right? Like, for us, that would be limiting in our ability to scale the organization. And, you know, we've got fantastic cost ratios, about 15 cents in the dollar, and we've always been very proud of that. But if we were to do 100%, we wouldn't have been able to scale and wouldn't have been able to raise as much money as we have.
Agree.
Yep, so I have a question for Adam. You said something that struck me as profound. I'm Katie Smith-Millway, and I lead research and publishing for the Bridgespan Group, and we have been studying scale and what we would call transformative scale for years, and this notion that a lot of organizations make progress, but they don't come anywhere close to solving what the need is. So what you said that struck me as profound was that your movement came before your mission. And one of the paths to scale, obviously, is turning your mission into a movement. But I wondered if in the 21st century we are seeing such a need for affinity that there are more organizations where the movement is coming first, and whether that is actually a radical way to think about scale. I mean, you know, I haven't heard this story many times, but maybe you have. So I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I often say, you can't think outside the box if you live inside the box. And what I mean by that is, if my starting point for Movember was as a Chief Marketing Officer of the Prostate Cancer Foundation, and the CEO came to me and said, hey, I need you to create a campaign that's going to engage young men and women, there is no way known. If that was my starting point, I would have thought about Movember. There's no way known. And we, as I mentioned, none of us had any charitable experience. We thought about, you know, bringing back the moustache, and it was almost a happy accident that we realized the power of the conversation, that we then thought, let's build a movement around this. What's our cause that aligns with what we're trying to achieve? So we came at that in a very different way, and I think a lot about now, we live in the charity box now and have for the last 13 years. It's like, how do we innovate? How do we think outside the box? And that becomes really hard. And part of it is forums like this where we can think, and but we do sort of hackathons where we get people from outside of our industry coming in, and we give them challenges without any boundaries around what is normal at Movember, what is expected of the charity industry, and without any financial limitations, and just see what they come up with. And a lot of times there'll be stuff in there that'll come up, and it's the power of group genius around, all right, that's an idea that if we tweak it a little bit, it could work over here. So yeah, it is interesting the way that this is evolving. Sorry, I missed that.
Has anyone else done that started with?
Not off the top of my head. No.
Got a question in the red.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, my name's Nat Painter. I work at an organization called Safe Water Network. And our objective is to shift how water supply is addressed within the global water sector. So the movement that we're trying to inspire is less around individuals and more around organizations, other implementers. We have a methodology that we feel is pretty strong. And so our goal is to work with other nonprofits to apply the methodology, to work with the donor agencies, the governments to support this. Conversation has largely been around a movement of individuals. Wondering if you could comment a bit around a movement of organizations, which are of course comprised of individuals, but nonetheless different incentives, probably different trigger points or things that resonate. Thank you.
Good one, Nat.
Yeah, that is a good one.
I don't know that I have a quick answer for that, but I think that there's, it's a tough one because everyone sort of, I mean, I don't know, you guys work in nonprofits. There's a lot of competition among nonprofits. It's probably as competitive, more competitive than any industry. You guys agree with that? You guys see that? There's a sense of competition. I think hopefully that's changing a bit, and there's a sense of collaboration. I think that's what it's going to take is a real sense of open collaboration to like think differently and do things differently that aren't always self-serving. How you get there, that's an interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure you could create a movement through organization, like corporates. Because for me, it's like, you know, that's top down then, and you're telling people what to do, whereas a movement is about a group of people banding together because they have this common interesting cause, not because they've been told by a corporate that they work for that we're now, you know, passionate about the distribution of water. So I'm not even sure.
I actually think that's one of the challenges that they've had with sustainable development goals is that it feels kind of top down and it feels prescriptive and it feels a little corporate, so to speak, or governmental. And I think it's hard for people to really attach to that. So there needs to be some rebranding there. But I think that I think what you guys are doing is important. And I don't know that, like Adam said, whether a movement is the right terminology for that. But I think, you know, an alliance for sure. So I want to think about that one. Talk to you more about that one.
Corporate support is key, but at a different level than at the grassroots movement level.
Go ahead, Brad.
Hi, my name's Blythe Hill, and I run an anti-trafficking foundation called Dressember, similar to Movember actually in the way that it functions. It's a month-long challenge where women wear dresses in the month of December to raise awareness and funding for anti-trafficking organizations. Adam and I good to see you, Adam. We've talked before. My question's for both of you. So we're a fairly young organization. We've only had 3 campaign years, but we've managed to raise over $1.5 million. And so my question is about the rate of growth that you've both had at your respective organizations. It sounds like you rely a lot on organic peer-to-peer growth, which is where we're at too, but I'm curious about any marketing methods that you found worked in the early years, ones that didn't work, the amount of budgeting or focus that you put into marketing outside of your participants' word of mouth.
I mean, in the early years, there was no social media for us. Our first social media foray was MySpace. So again, I think it comes back to thinking about this. You're providing a platform, and you've got to accelerate and empower people to tell your story on your behalf, to leverage all of their networks. And for us in the early days, it was literally word of mouth, old school social networking, face-to-face, email. And then we sort of juiced that as much as we could with PR and the like. And now for us, it's like, you know, how can we plug into all the different platforms to make it super simple for someone, you know, a lady wearing a dress for the month or growing a moustache or whatever it is, to tell that message and give them examples, but let them own it as well.
I think I'll just say this. I think that there's a commonality among organizations that are kind of in the similar life cycle as we're talking about here. That there's often when there's that early momentum, peer-to-peer is great because you capitalize on that energy. But I think what I'm seeing is a number of organizations now trying to, okay, now where do we go from here? How do we build like a monthly sustainer program where people are giving a recurring donation product for people? That's the common theme I'm hearing often, as much as peer-to-peer now, is how do we build that? And how do you compete with the incredibly growing, exponentially growing number of nonprofits that are coming on the scene all the time, and there's just much more competition. So I think that there's peer-to-peer is important, but there's also that can't last forever necessarily, or it can, but it's not always just going to keep going up and up and up. So how do you then build on that with things like monthly recurring programs, which is something that I think everyone needs to figure out, because that's where you don't have to, your fundraising costs go down significantly when you start building that. So, yeah.
That's it. That's all the time we have, unfortunately. I know that you guys have a lot more questions. This was an excellent, amazing discussion. Some of the tweets were awesome. We had some good questions there, too. Unfortunately, we can't get to everybody. These guys have to go do a quick interview, so don't rush the stage. I'm sure that you might want to. But they'll be around attending some sessions. So enjoy the rest of the conference. Please let us know if you need anything at all, and have fun on day 2. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, man.
That was good.
Good job. Thank you.